Hey, what's up, students? Let's talk about 5-6, parallel and perpendicular lines. Now, parallel lines are super easy to spot. They're super easy to make. All you need is to have the exact same slope, the exact same rate of change, the exact same rise over run, and you will have parallel lines, side by side forever. I like to think of the two L's in the word parallel representing the two lines. Two lines have the exact same slope, and they will be parallel forever and ever. Perpendicular lines have opposite reciprocal slopes. So a quick example of that, opposite reciprocals. One of them is going to have to be positive, one of them is going to have to be negative, and one of them is going to have to be, actually they're going to be reciprocals of each other, excuse me. So 3 1/3 are reciprocals, positive 3 and negative 1/3 are opposites. So they have to be opposite and reciprocal. So I like to think positive and negative, and one's got to be flipped. So another quick example would be like 2/3 and then negative 3/2. Okay, so you got to flip and make opposite. Okay, one's got to be positive, one's got to be negative, and they have to be reciprocals. So opposite and then reciprocals have to be flipped, and they have to be opposite, one positive, one negative. Okay, moving on. So the two big forms we're going to talk about slope-intercept form and standard form, and the ability to go back and forth between the two of them is kind of a big deal. In my opinion, it's better to be able to go from standard form to slope-intercept form, because slope-intercept form is pretty easy to look at because the slope and the intercept are out in the open. Standard form, it's a little bit easier. I don't even say it's easier, but sometimes in some math situations, it's easier to make a standard form equation than a slope-intercept form. Again, it just kind of depends on the situation. So I'll start all the way on the right here. I'd rather do this. I want to focus on this. How can you change a standard form equation into a slope-intercept form? It's actually quite easy. You just solve for y. Solve for y. So it's just a two-step algebra question. So let's solve for y. This 5 is connected by multiplication. That's too aggressive. This 3x is kind of over here all by itself. So let's go ahead and move it over to the right side. Okay. So one thing I do to kind of set myself up for success is I actually just scoot the 18 over here. Okay, I don't know what made such a wide 18. It's kind of weird. There you go. I scoot the 18 over, and so I have the negative 3x right there, so it's almost already in slope-intercept form. Divide everything by 5. This is the number one mistake people make. Some people like divide both sides by 5 and make a big fraction bar. Well, dividing two things by 5 is the same thing as dividing each piece by 5. So the 5 cancels. Y is all by itself, so the slope-intercept form of this equation is negative 3/5 x plus 18 divided by 5. As a decimal, that would be like 3.6, I believe. So you could write it as 3.6, or it just depends, okay? 18/5 isn't a very pretty number. 3 3/5 is not a very pretty number. So if it turns into a nice decimal, make it a nice decimal. But when it comes to slope, okay, keep that as a fraction. The one that I'm not too concerned about is how can you change slope-intercept form into standard form. I guess the only time this would really come into play is solving by intercepts. We've talked about that. I think we talked about that in 5.5, is that you can actually graph these pretty quickly if you just do the hide and divide method. Hide and divide, you can make intercepts really quick. Well, one of the intercepts is 5, so that's kind of easy. But let's keep moving on here. Okay, so how can you make standard form? Well, the number one rule is you can't have any decimals or fractions in standard form. Everything's got to be a pretty whole number, or integer, excuse me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make everything not have a fraction. So if divide by 3 is my biggest, excuse me, I'm talking too fast. If divide by 3, this third here, if that's my biggest denominator, I'm just going to multiply everything by 3. So now I've got 3y, basically just distributed property here. 2/3 times 3 is a 2x. 3 times 5 is a positive 15. Okay, totally do that. You can do that. You can take an entire equation, multiply, divide by whatever you want, as long as you do everything in the equation, as long as you all multiply it by the same thing, then you're going to be okay. And then basically, you want to get x and y together again. So minus 2x, minus 2x. So if I rewrite it in standard form, negative 2x plus 3y equals 15. 15 gets all by itself. So you want to have an A value, a B value, and a C value. There you go. We're back into standard form. So if you want to take some time, I would encourage you to push pause. Take the original equation that we typed out, put it in a Desmos, and then put this dude in a Desmos. I guarantee you we graph the same thing. Okay, so that's kind of the first introductory part, how to go back and forth between the two forms, standard form and slope-intercept form. Okay, going back and forth is kind of a big deal. Again, I think it's more important for you to go from standard form to slope-intercept form because, again, right there, slope-intercept right out in the open. But then again, standard form, also has its pros as well. Okay, you can graph this one really quick. Oh, look, my y-intercept is 5. Crazy, right? I knew that right there. My x-intercept would be negative 7.5. 15 divided by negative 2, negative 7.5. There you go. So you can graph it just as quick either way. All right, so let's move on to the next thing. Pay attention to the next video.